Mic check. Mic check. 1 2. 1 2. 1 2. Mic check. 1 2. quorum, and so we will go ahead and call this meeting to order. Clerk Hunsaker, are you satisfied with the roll call that you have?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. With that, I am going to rise here in the chamber and lead us in an invocation. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this meeting and this opportunity to come together. Thank you for the technology that allows it. We pray for everyone who's being affected by the coronavirus. We pray for those families who have lost loved ones and haven't been able to mourn in the way that we're typically used to doing. And we certainly pray for all of those people that are working in the hospitals and doing those things that they're doing as best as they know how to do them to keep us all safe in a truly unique time. We just pray that you'd give us the strength to meet the challenges of life. And we pray all these things in your holy name. Amen. And now in the council chamber, I want to pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so we will go ahead and get into our one agenda item. I'll remind everyone, of course, to mute your phones, and I think everybody already knows that, but just remind you again until you have something that you'd like to say. And then I will be asking, although we just have one item here for consideration, a roll call vote in order to make the vote clear for Clerk Hunsaker to record. With that being said, we will open up the Budget and Finance Committee, which is chaired by Mr. W.J. Pittman, and we have one item for consideration there, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Pittman to lead this conversation.
Thank you, Mayor. As y'all know, we're here to talk about the Economic Relief Program. We've made a couple changes since it was brought up at the last meeting. Mayor, do you want to talk about what specific changes were made? Do you want to go over the whole program again? I kind of will turn that over to you.
Certainly. I think I will go over the program in general form, and then I will let our attorney speak for a moment, as our attorney has made some revisions to the agreement. And then after that, we can get into a more robust debate about other recommended or suggested changes. So the nature of this program is an effort to tap into approximately $38,000, which is money which has been held in an account for a business revolving loan fund. This was money that was received via a grant from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity many years ago. We've not had a lot of participation in that grant program, in that revolving loan program, and it is a repurposing of that money to help meet the needs of businesses that are struggling during this coronavirus outbreak. The quick way to explain it would be that if a business has paid a bill over the last several months since the turn of the year, they would be able to fill out an application, provide a copy of that bill, as well as proof of payment of that bill, and the city would pay for that singular expense up to and not to exceed a grant amount of $1,000. And so what we would hope this could do would be to help relieve some businesses who have paid a mortgage payment or paid a big insurance payment or whatever the case may be, because we know the difference between making it through this and not, maybe having one of those larger expenses covered. The way the program is written is that there would be a 90% forgiveness on this grant. So the business receiving the grant would have to pay back 10% of that over the course of a period of time, which I believe 400 days from the date of the grant award is what is written into the application at this time. On just a personal note, I want to thank Scott Evans and Sandra Ripley, who have worked very hard on this application, and I think that this would really send a message that the city of Murphysboro understands that 80% of our budget comes from retail sales tax, and we want to do what we can within our power to try to help support those who ultimately are the ones that take the risk to fund our operations. And so that is my initial take on it, and I turn it over to Attorney Heller to speak to the amendments that he has and his office has made to this application.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, the amendments that we made were more in the nature of formatting the agreement so that the provisions of the declared program and the provisions of the agreement mirrored each other. We took out all reference to the word loan because these are not really loans. These are grants, and they're grants of which only a percentage has to be repaid if they qualify for forgiveness. So we made them truly grants. We set the time of 400 days because the program calls for a year, and after a year you look back and see what they did. And so if they didn't do what they were supposed to do and they have to pay it back, then they've got another 35 days for us to look at that and put out our demands for them to pay it back. At the same time, that's when they would put their 10% back. So it's pretty clearly written, and it's a small program. I think that you won't have any trouble with the way you have it written. And Richard gets credit for the work because he did the detail work, and I think you've got an ordinance here that you can pass, and that will make it legal to do what you want to do.
And Ed, just to make sure that, because we have a number of people on the conference call this evening, I'm sure there's many members of the public and business owners. When you talk about paying it back, you're talking about the 10%.
Well, there are two paybacks. One payback is the 10%, and we would expect that would be the most of the people. The other payback are the people that for somewhat reason after getting the grant did not do what they were supposed to do, as a result of which under the program they would owe it all back.
All right, well that is...
We leave that decision to be made at the end of the year when forgiveness is to be given, and the 10% or all would be paid back.
But essentially the requirements for meeting the obligation where they would only pay back the 10% are what?
Well, they're really not very difficult. Let me get to the spot in the document so that I can.
And if Miss Ripley wants to try to help here, she can as well.
Sandra, use your words. That's fine.
I believe part of it is that they have to, in business, I'm trying to find the exact wording as well.
Paragraph 2.3 is part of it.
Scott, feel free to...
Must remain open. They must remain open or reopen and retain or reemploy permanent jobs prior to the grant end date, 1 year from the grant award. Okay. So if they close the business down, then they have to pay it back. If they keep their business going, if they reemploy permanent jobs and still have their business going, they don't have to pay it back.
All right, well, it seemed like we
So
had...
business moves forward in its normal path through won't pay back. Somebody that quits in the street will have to deal with payback.
All right, thank you, Mr. Heller. WJ, you're the chairman of this committee. It would seem that we somewhat have that backwards to me, because if somebody goes out of business, it would seem like it would be more difficult for them to pay it back. Do you agree?
Yes, I mean, obviously it would be more difficult for them to pay it back, but I mean, if our intent is to help them stay in business by giving them this grant, it would keep somebody from taking $1,000 and shutting down anyway, and then, only having to pay back $100.
I can understand that, but I don't, I, and I understand that sentiment completely, but I tend to think that maybe we need to take a look at that, and ultimately the council's gonna have the authority to review these individually after the 400 days, but I don't wanna make this, program so stringent that people would say, well, I don't want to pursue the grant.
I mean, I don't think that is, too much to ask. So all we're saying is that, you'll reopen. I mean, we can always, on an individual basis as a council, say, we understand that the hardship caused you to go out of business, so we can make repayment agreements with individual businesses on that level, that, maybe we give them longer time to pay back and then pay.
The mayor,
Yes, Mr.
and
Hell.
over here, how about, we can change the draft of the participation agreement and the ordinance agreement to put in place a hardship provision with the council having the right to determine that a hardship exists, and so the repayment's waived.
I think that would be a great addition to the language, just so that people don't have to make such a gamble as to whether or not, well, if I participate in this thing and, I'm trying to make it, I'm doing the best I can to try to make it, but it don't, then I'm gonna owe the entirety of this back. So yes, I think that would be a good addition. WJ, would you agree?
Yeah, I would be okay with that.
All right, I don't want to dominate the conversation. Other members of the city council have questions, comments on that part of this debate?
Mr. Mayor, I have to make her adjustment. I'm in agreement with the statement that was made. Yes, the city is doing a service to its constituents with providing the loan, but just because we provide this assistance, it does not guarantee that every business is going to make it. And I do feel like it will be an additional financial hardship without having an addendum to say we'll consider, whether or not the city will consider whether or not to make a failing business repay a loan in its entirety.
Well, can I reply to that, Mayor?
Yes, certainly. Mr. Pittman?
It would not be an additional debt because we're paying off a debt that they've already incurred. So, or that, they would have incurred anyway. So it's not like we're adding an additional $1,000 to what they have paid. And if it wasn't to us, if it's a creditor or a utility or, you can be guaranteed that they're gonna ask for the whole thing back. But.
And that's what I'm referring to, Jay.
Right, and going back to what Will said,
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with putting that in there, that we can look at that, and if there is an actual hardship and they're closed because of this pandemic and they aren't able to open because of this, then we are able to grant them some leeway.
Yes, that's exactly what I was saying. I know other like you said, utilities or whomever may be saying you owe X, Y, and Z. So although we aren't providing, it's just one extra add-on to something that might already be disastrous. That was kind of my point, but we're saying the same thing.
Thank you very much, Ms.
Mayor?
Westman. Yes, is that Ms. Campos?
Mayor, this is Alderman Hughes.
Yes, Barb, go ahead.
I am in full agreement with putting an extra statement in there about a hardship thing. I think it really should be done, so that council could make a, one by one, um, we could, either say yes or no, this was, you closed because you just wanted to, or you closed because of this pandemic. So I'm in full agreement of adding that extra, wordage about hardship and letting council make the decision. I do have a question, and I probably should have asked this before. I don't know that I really even thought about it. On the funding request documentation, the second, third page, whatever, it says the reimbursement will be considered for expenses that were incurred from January 1st, 2020 to May 15th. Do we really want to go back to January, or do we want to start sometime around the time that the state government shut down?
Well, I think one of the things
The thing is, January and February, if they weren't paying their bills, that wasn't because of the pandemic, though. Does that make sense?
yes, I understand what you're saying about that. I believe maybe at one point in the talks, Mr. Evans may have referenced the fact that some of the larger bills that a business may incur may only be paid on a quarterly or an annual basis. And so allowing us to go back a little ways into the past might open up some of these things that we are allowing people to submit. And if we didn't do that, then we might not allow some of those bills to come in that are not necessarily paid on a month-to-month basis. Scott, do you want to speak to that?
No, I think that's what our thinking was, Mr. Mayor. Because of certain things that are due on a quarterly basis, it did get a little leeway. The reality is, they probably have several things that are due all in this time frame. Even if
They're only going to choose one.
Yeah.
I do understand that. Thank you. I hadn't thought about things like workman's compensation insurance that they may be paying on employees or something, and that may be paid quarterly, or even, other things that are paid quarterly. I just couldn't figure out why we were going back that far, but thank you very much. I'm okay with that.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Hughes.
Mayor, this is Alderman Pearson.
Yes, Mr. Pearson.
Oh, okay. I got a couple of questions on the first page, and I know Scott can answer these pretty easy, but it seems like it's going to be quite a job. It says, must have been operational and good financial health on March the 16th. Are we going to require financial statements from all of those people? Or Scott, are you going to be the one to go through that? Seems like an awful burden for a person to have to go through all those statements just to even get this thing started.
Well, and we talked about that, Bill. I don't think anybody wants to be in the business of auditing these businesses in this purpose. So I think that was just a general statement.
Okay.
This is intended for, a good faith effort from the businesses that aren't already just about to close their doors, that type of thing.
Okay.
But I don't believe we're going to be doing any audit of any of their numbers necessarily, other than the proof of payment and that type of thing.
Okay. Now I have one other thing that I need cleared up that I probably can't read this correctly, but in a case of a renter or an owner, it says here one application for physical address. Does that mean that either the renter or the owner or both can apply for it?
Well, Bill, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the pieces of language that I wanted to take out of the application. We are going to be prioritizing, and we say that further down, the businesses first, and I had initially put that in there to try to keep us from having multiple applications and from the same address, and so we could spread the money around a little bit and have a little bit wider effect. But after some review, I think one application for common ownership being considered and prioritizing the businesses first kind of makes that language maybe unnecessary. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say?
I think it does, yeah. I can just see that if some of these people have three or four buildings and 3 or 4 renters that you know, we could use up all the money in 1 or 2 places. You know, it seemed like they would, I just didn't understand exactly how that was written, so.
WJ, I know you.
Sure you guys can work it out.
I know WJ has
Yeah.
some thoughts on this item.
Yeah, so, I mean, the intent is, I mean, I think we can assume that we're going to give the entire $38,000 now. There may be several business owners, and Will, when I talked to you, I used the building on the corner of 14th and Walnut as an example. That's a building that's got a landlord that owns that's got apartments in there, and then it's also got 2 or 3 retail stores in there as well. I believe those technically have different physical addresses, so even if we had that in there, they would probably be all right. After our conversation, I thought about that a little bit more. But, I mean, our intent is to not keep, you know, we don't want, if that landlord applies first, we don't want those retail businesses to not be able to get it because their landlord applies first. So that was our thinking in taking it out of there, that, you know, the common ownership clause prevents somebody who owns multiple businesses to be able to apply for each business, a bill from each business. I was almost even okay with that because I mean, if a person owns multiple businesses, all 3 or 4 could be hurting right now. But I understand that we want as many people to benefit from this program as possible as well. So that's why we took the physical address clause out of there, was for situations where there could be one building with several businesses that were actually different businesses.
Okay. Now I had one other question that may have already answered, but it says on here, if I can find it again, about reemploying people, as one of the requirements, reemploying permanent people. How about, Ed, will this hardship thing, say I have 3 employees and I can see halfway through the year that I'm gonna have to lay one of them off. Will this hardship thing, will that cover that? Because they will not have employed they will not have reemployed everybody at that point.
Bill, it doesn't say that they have to reemploy everybody. It says they have to reopen, they have to reemploy a permanent employee.
Yes, I understand that. That's what I'm asking. So if they lay off one of those permanent employees, are they still eligible for this loan?
I don't think they have defaulted. I don't think they have to pay back anything more than 10%.
Okay, well, that's what I was hoping.
Yeah. And Mayor will, and Sandra and Scott will correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but this is key toward a present little boost of what we can afford to help the people keep going. And keeping
going. I just didn't want them to lose their, I just didn't want them to lose their grant because they laid off a person. That's what I was saying. Well, that was my intention. That was my question, actually.
The answer to that would be that would not, unless that's the only employee he had, then we would have to look at the situation.
Okay. That's all I have.
Along that same line, can I ask you this? So, a sole proprietorship that may be the owner as an only employee, are they exempt from being able to receive this grant money?
No, but I think there, for sole proprietorship, and now I'm thinking about what the intent here is. I'm not sure about the language. I'll look at the language. But the sole proprietor, his obligation would be to reopen. And
So they don't have to meet
he's still going at the end of
all of the requirements. So they don't have to, if they didn't have
that's not the intention that the program's designed for. And there I call on Will and Scott again. The language
I could
change.
change that. If I could, well, if I could, Ed, I'll speak to that. Yeah, I don't believe we ever intended this to be limited to businesses that had employees in the true sense of the word, as far as a W-2 and payroll taxes and that type of thing. So a sole proprietor, I think, who was the only person in that shop, could qualify if they met all the other things we asked.
I think that's a good idea.
I think that's what the language contemplates.
Yes, and absolutely. I want to remind everyone that we, right or wrong, borrowed some of this language from the Downstate Stabilization Grant and used that as a framework to construct this document. And so some of that language about the urgent need and about financial health and things remained in there simply just because we wanted to have some small onus for us to be able to fall back on to say that if somebody would come in who had been, answering a classified ad in the newspaper to stuff envelopes or something. Now, while that very well may be a business, we need to be able to have some things to sort of set as a standard. And I also think that, yes, sole proprietorships, I believe, would, the way that I see it, be eligible for this. The only caveat to that is we do ask for, Scott Evans, can you help me out here? The two documents, one was something from the Department of Revenue or a professional regulation.
Yes, we asked for, if they're in the business of selling, merchandise, therefore, obviously a sales tax generator, we asked for a copy of their reseller certificate that is issued to them by the Department of Revenue. They all know what that would be. They often have at times placed prominently in their business. And then we also said, well, a business that would not sell products necessarily that provide a service that's been shut down, such as hair salons and various places like that, would have some type of professional license that would be a minimum bar, a minimum standard for them to show that they are an ongoing legitimate business. So we thought those two things would capture the vast majority of businesses that our intent was, and I think that also would prevent some of the problems that could arise in the, hey, does the tenant get this or does the landlord get this? Well, our thinking was in this scenario, the tenant being a merchandiser of some sort would be the one to apply for this, and then by default, the landlord is going to benefit because they very well could be paying the rent to the landlord with this money. So that was where our thinking was here.
Yes, I think that was very well stated, Scott. Thank you.
Gloria.
I heard two people at once. I know I made out Alderman Urvis, and then after that, I think was it maybe Ms. Campos. So we'll go in that order if I had it right.
Okay.
All right, thank you. I have two comments. First, we talked about the landlord or the business owner. If I look at the one of the first, I guess, fourth paragraph, it says available to assist private for-profit retail businesses with sales of goods or services to the public. So the way I read that, a landlord would not even comply with that. It would have to be somebody that's selling goods or services. Is that not correct?
Yes. Yeah, that was also why we put that in there for that very reason that I just spoke about. Exactly. That kind of meshes with the requirement a few pages back where we asked for those documents or certificates and or the licenses.
Right. And I didn't remember if that was in the prior agreement or not, but I thought that answered the question now.
It was not actually, and it was in response to the last meeting where that was the question. So we kind of hashed around different ideas on how to address that topic, and that's what we came up with.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that addresses it very well. Another point was the date. It seems like we need to go beyond May might not be opening until June sometime. So I think we should extend that, have a later end date.
Well, I think one of the things that we thought was, we could do that, amend that end date sort of administratively, depending upon the volume of applications that we get early on. I have no problem amending it even right now, though, to say the end of May, and then just sort of administratively amending that as we judge a number of applications.
Yeah, we don't have any idea how long, how quickly people will apply, but I don't want them to be precluded if they're paying a bill June 1st or something like that.
What do you think? What would you suggest might be a better date, John?
Well, maybe even July 1st. We're not, from what was mentioned today in the governor and the state's discussion, maybe more like June 15th. We don't know, so a later end date would seem to be better than an earlier end date.
One of the things.
Mayor?
Yes, Ms. Campos.
That was, Ms. Campos, but my question was in reference, about the landlord and tenant and, Mr. Herbert was the one who asked that. And
Okay.
then, pretty much that's been taken care of, but good point on the deadline for the application.
Ms. Ripley, was that you that had chimed in?
I believe that Mayor, let me start on the Hughes, if I could.
Sure, go ahead. I'm sorry for my confusion.
No, that's okay. I didn't know if Ms. Ripley had come in also, and I had forgotten that Ms. Campbell was next. I apologize, I didn't mean to jump in there. But going back to what John said, we're going to January. If you think about that, if we went till half of the year, that would give them 2 quarters, actually. Giving them 2 quarters. If they were paying things quarterly, if they did the first quarter, they were okay, and then they couldn't the second quarter, it wouldn't eliminate them being able to apply if we went to like half of the year, the end of June, for example. John said we have no idea when this might open up. And I think there could be some kind of statement that was easily put in there that this ending date is dependent upon the availability of the tenant.
Well, and one thing that I just
run out, so
one thing that I remember now, that as we set that date, we had a conversation of, do we just want to essentially award these as they come in until the funds are exhausted? And my response was, I don't want to do that. I wanted to set a firm date so that we could get all of the applications in front of us and then consider them as a whole, because if we have more applications than we have funds available, then ultimately we're going to have to leave somebody out in the cold. And I want to be able to make that judgment based upon looking at a totality of a picture of the applications based off of a hard cutoff date, because I would hate to award a marginal application and get it paid out on May the 20th, and then on June the 10th have what looks like to be a much more dire situation present itself and not have any funds to be able to fund that particular grant. And so that was, I think, the reason for the earlier cutoff date, was to get a pool of applications in, look at them, evaluate them, award them, and then if we still have money left over, then we can, open it back up again, if that makes sense.
that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Mayor, this is again.
Yeah, Mr. Pittman.
I guess I understood it a little differently. So your intention is we'll leave the time, set a specific time for applications to be in, and then we won't award any of them until after that date. I guess I was under the impression that it was kind of a first come, it, you could have a check shortly thereafter, and, you know, if 3 weeks later we still had funds left and somebody else came and applied, they would get it shortly after that. But you want all of the applications in to look at them before we dispersed any funds?
Well, I really don't have a strong feeling about doing it one way or the other as this gets debated back and forth. You know, it's a matter of, do you want to look at these and award them based on merit, or is the merit essentially the ability to get the application, you know, turned in a timely fashion? And either way,
I mean, my only thought on it is that, I mean, we've talked about how dire the need is for funds and for businesses to have additional funds, you know, and I know it's not even that, I mean, I guess May 15th isn't even, I mean, it's a couple weeks, but, I mean, a couple weeks right now is, you know, it could be, it's a long time to some businesses, I'm sure, and waiting for $1,000.
would you prefer that they be paid out essentially on a first come, first served basis, as you know, we apply the standards that we have set forth in the application administratively? I mean, that seems to be the way you would prefer it, and I don't necessarily disagree with that.
I mean, I don't have a strong feeling either way. I mean, if it were solely up to me, I think that's the way I would go, but other people have, you know, a different thought on it. I'm not opposed to waiting until we get all the applications. I think you put, you know, more onus on us. There's more, as a city, a person could have an argument that we were being more preferential to somebody if we got all the applications in and then didn't pick them, as opposed to we're not giving it to you because we have no funds left. But, you know, if they were in the same pool as everybody else, we'd have to have a, if I were a business owner, I'd want to know what the argument against me not getting it as opposed to somebody else, and I'd expect it to be a really good argument, you know?
No, I think you make a really great point, and so I think that we would be better off to go back to what we had contemplated before, which was essentially to award these out on a first come, first served basis. Mr. Urbis, you were the one that sort of started this line of thinking. Do you have a follow-up comment on any of that?
Well, I think it should be available. You know, I don't know. I guess I really don't have a thought on it. The downstate program, they're doing it like in 2 waves. You know, that's another thought. You could have, you know, if there were still funds available. So.
Well, I think that the point WJ makes is a good one, and I think that we'd be better off in terms of making this a, you know, first come, first served situation until the funds are exhausted. And then if we want to revisit it thereafter, I suppose that we can. That would make me go back to the, you know, timestamp in these things as they would be submitted via email, so there'd be no question about who's came in at what time.
I don't have a problem with that. I did have one other comment though. It relates to that 2.3 paragraph in the agreement. We talked about the businesses having to stay open. I'm reading that a little differently. I think it's maybe not real clear. It says business must remain open or reopen and retain or reemploy permanent jobs prior to the grant end date. It doesn't say until the end of the grant. So it makes it sound like they just have to do it some point prior to the end date, which from what I was hearing was not the intention. So I don't know, maybe Ed, if you want to look at that.
John, I am looking at that. You know, Richard would be better speaking right now because he went into this detail. But I think what we should do is we should have a clear statement of what the council's intention is that must be done in the ordinance and the agreement that we're gonna vote on here pretty soon. And so I think that we need to, as a council,
But I agree with that.
discuss what they want that criteria to be. What
I
does
agree with the
business
hardship.
have?
I agree with the hardship provision. I mean, if somebody reopens and 6 months from now, they just can't, stay, I don't wanna penalize want them to be penalized because they made a good faith effort to stay open and just, weren't able to do it.
Maybe that, John, maybe that's the term we need to put in. Businesses must make a good faith effort to do these things. They must make, if we give them just the duty to make a good faith effort, that gives us all the ability we need to judge whether we think that was a good faith effort or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's realistic.
I think so
We
too.
just take, we'll put that revision into 2.3 along with the hardship language. Fair, does that simplify?
It's Alderman Pearson again, Mayor.
Yes.
If you're going to do it on a first come, first served basis like you're talking about, then there's no need to have a grant end date, is there? The end is when you run out of money.
Well, I
We
suppose,
can't have both.
no, you can't, and so I suppose the language would be applications will be considered until funds are exhausted.
Well, the grant,
Scott, I have one.
1 year from the time the grant was awarded.
Okay, I misread that, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Scott, I have one other question about the business, okay, let's say we have a business like, I'm just thinking a business here like writing or like the car wash. They don't have a professional license, but they would have to have, in order to apply for this, a business license. Would that be correct with the state of Illinois? Because most of those are just labor intensive businesses, those type businesses is what I'm talking about. That, have no, they have no professional license. They have no professional license, but they,
In your example, Bill, Writings would probably have a retailer certificate because they probably charge sales tax on the materials that they're including.
yeah, he may do that, I don't know, but,
Now,
okay,
car wash.
but as long as they have a retail license, if they have a business license or a retail license or a sales tax number, then they're okay.
Yeah,
Would that be the way I'd understand it? Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
that's all I need, yeah, okay, thanks. That's it for me.
A legal business, you can't.
All right, do we have any other, comments from the alderman on this, application or suggested amendments?
Well, I feel like I could be talking the same Jeff, and I'm sorry, but like, I've got a couple more things and then I'm done. So, I can't find it in here, I know we talked about the financial health, part of the application and that we're not gonna audit financials. And maybe this is a question for Ed, are we at risk at all? So, Scott, I'm sure you know several businesses that are technically long-standing businesses could show a loss on a tax return. I mean, do we have any liability if somebody showed a loss on a tax return and then somebody who didn't came after the funds were exhausted and we had given somebody who did?
WJ, and council, we're always, as a municipality, everything we do is subject to that potential, somebody making that kind of a complaint. Our immunities protect us so long as we develop a reasonable process and we adhere to our process and we don't discriminate against anybody for the classic discrimination reasons, or we don't have some gross, retribution conduct or something like that towards something. So we're not much at risk here. One thing I'm thinking about on the risk level is we're talking about a first come, first served. What is our actual review? We still have a review committee here who reviews each application and approves or doesn't approve, do we not?
Yes. Right. That was actually my next question, because we talked about that at the last meeting, was are we going to allow these, as long as they meet the qualifications of the application, them to receive the money prior to their application being reviewed by the entire council? And I think we had said most people were for that, that we didn't have to vote on this one individually at council level.
I can't, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask Will if he had that same thought, that that's what we talked about the last meeting.
Yes, once we get an application in, it's gonna be considered by myself, by Mr. Pittman, by Mr. Evans, and Ms. Ripley, and as long as they meet the standards that we've set forth, then they will be awarded without further consent of the council.
Mayor, this is Gloria. Do we have any idea when, after the amendments and everything, when this, program, is gonna be able to start? Or how are you planning on handling making it, public so people can go and, apply for it?
Well, I think what we do is we say that the application will be made available for download on the city website or pick up through the drive-through at the Dom Administration Building. Once we get these revisions made to the application, then we can publicly announce whatever that is going to be. I don't think these revisions will take very long. Today is the 22nd of April, and so if we wanted to make these revisions and have them ready, say, this coming Monday morning, for that would be sort of the process that I would envision.
I think that's a good idea. And Mayor, would we, if we do add it to the website, I would think this would be something that we could use our texting service and send that link out, with a little bit of information through the texting service?
Yeah, certainly, we could definitely do that and make that point back to the website, of course, and then use the city Facebook and my personal and with the website. And of course, we would make the chamber and the unique shops on Main Street aware, so that they could contact their membership through their various communication channels.
And hopefully,
Hey, Mayor, it's Alderman.
Yes, Mr. Bastian.
Yes, I do have a question about the licensing, and it's just a thought, and I understand that some of them are going to have to show proof that they are licensed with the state of Illinois, which I'll use Illinois Department of Professional Regulation as the example. And if it expired while COVID-19 started during the time, they may have been granted extra time. But I think we need to look at the license of some of them to make sure that they were, that they were current and they hadn't expired, say, over a year ago. I think that needs to be looked at before the decision is made on the application.
Yes, I think that's a very good point, and I think that may be something that the committee takes a very close look at. Obviously, many of those have been extended, but if somebody comes in with a professional license that expired in 2016 or something, that's
right.
Going to be a valid application.
Right, and I do think that needs to be looked at. Yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mayor, this is Alderman Keith. Could I ask one more question?
Certainly.
Can we make, once we have all this conversation and see if there's any public comment, can a, motion be made to do this with these added addendums or corrections or whatever, and not have another meeting, just, go ahead and get it going, so it'll be out there for the, businesses quicker?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any more council member, questions? Okay, so it's my recollection, and anybody have anything to add, that the amendments that we wanted to make were the hardship, clause in there, and the, what do we say, good faith, the business must make a good faith effort to reopen and hire back full-time employees. Are there any other amendments besides that?
Well, we were going to remove the physical address language, and we were going to also change the bottom to where applications will be considered until funds are exhausted.
Right, and the first come, first served.
Correct.
Okay.
I don't think we have a, I don't think, this is Ed, I don't think we have a provision that does say that or needs to say that in our ordinance and our agreement. First come, first served is, I don't,
right.
I think that's a little risky for us. We should say applications will be considered as they arrive.
Right, okay.
Okay, yeah, well,
Okay.
makes sense.
And should you put on there until funds are exhausted then also?
Yes, certainly.
But we'll
add that.
We'll language in, reserve right to terminate program at any time.
That is in here somewhere, I saw that.
Good. I'll look at that again.
On termination 5.1, in 5.1, and this agreement may be terminated at any time by written mutual agreement of the parties. 5.1 does say that.
Well, yeah, I'll look at that because there's a termination of the individual agreement and there's a termination of the program.
Termination of the program. Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, WJ, do you have anything else?
I do not, so would entertain a motion with the stated amendment to the program.
WJ, we need to ask for public comment.
Okay, is there any public comment on tonight's discussion regarding the program? Sounds like there are none, Mayor.
All right. I'm sorry to have interrupted. Go ahead with what you're going to do there, WJ.
Entertain a motion to approve the program with the stated amendment.
Alderman Bass.
I'll make that motion. No, go ahead. I'll second it. Alderman Pearson.
Okay, sounds like Alderman Bastion made the motion, Alderman Pearson seconded. Want a roll call vote?
Clerk Hunziker?
Alderman Hughes,
Yes.
Alderman Curry Witzman,
Yes.
Alderman Brown,
Yes.
Alderman Pearson,
Yes.
Alderman McComb, Alderman Urbis,
Yes.
Alderman Bratton, Alderman Bastian,
Yes.
Alderman Campos,
Yes.
Alderman Pittman.
Yes.
All right, so the motion carries. I want to thank, again, everybody for being on this meeting this evening. I think this is some really good work, and I think that it's going to do some good. And so thank you all for your service to the city of Murphysboro. If there's nothing else for the conversation tonight, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. That's Alderman Hughes.
All right, we have a motion from
Second.
Alderman Hughes, a second from Ms. Campos. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Uh,
Motion carries. Thank you all so very much.